All right. Welcome in, everybody. Have we got a treat? Gustavs is here. He's got a slideshow presentation and everything because he's super prepared. He's like the Jordan Peterson super fan. So I want to make it clear up front: we are Jordan Peterson fans. The Peterson sphere is real. We're a part of it, right? Jordan Peterson is a great man. However, he should not be and will not be beyond all possible criticism. It's been a while, although I heard he's no longer in the hospital, which is wonderful news. And I hope he's improving rapidly because, boy, do we need him right now. So would be good to have him back. But yesterday on the Discord server, Gustavs proposed something very interesting. And I was like, say more. This is an interesting idea. I hadn't thought of that. And we are not the symbolic world people, although we love them dearly. So we're more looking at patterns, and I think that Gustavs has some patterns. So Gustavs, tell us what you want to tell us about yourself, and then about what you're going to be presenting today.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Gustavs. Good to see all of you. Hopefully we've met before. And yeah, we were just talking on the Discord about Peterson, about him hopefully being better now, apparently. And yeah, I mean Peterson is a big topic. Like we've all been impacted by him quite a lot, and in a very good way, I would say. But there's consistently this difficulty in grasping Peterson and sort of pinning him down, or sort of understanding really where he's going, or really understanding him, except in a sort of, I would say, like a formal way. Like it's quite easy to relate to him formally. You give him a handshake, maybe you say something nice to him, nice about him, like yeah, he's there. But how do you really understand him? How do we work together with him? And where is he really going? Because that's something that most people can't really cooperate with him on. Really, is about where he's ultimately going, because that that's what everybody seems to have difficulty with. So I just proposed that Peterson is the sort of the Leviathan, right? Because we were talking about the cyclicality of things, and about how there's the Ouroboros, the snake that eats its own tail, and about how Peterson is the materialist to end all materialists, and the way that I saw this, the image that came into my mind is of this large sea monster, this sea snake to end all sea snakes, that has eaten all the sea snakes, and there's none of them left except to start eating its own tail. So that's the image that came up, and we agreed to talk about it today. So I did prepare a little something, and I think it's quite interesting. And I learned a lot about Dr. Peterson from the reading I did today and the research that I did. Some things that I hadn't quite realized. Some yeah. So it'll be interesting, and I'm glad to be able to share it with you today and talk.
Excellent. Thank you, Gustavs. Yeah, we're big believers in make Final Cause great again here, as the banner would indicate. And yeah, a lot of the problems that we see are problems of people relating to the fact that we don't know where things are ultimately headed. And so that's where accelerationism comes from, right? Let's just do whatever they think it is. Usually it's war, unfortunately, or some other similarly stupid thing. And so that we get it over with, whatever it is, so we can get to the end, right? And then it's easier if you already know where you're going, right? And then maybe the path isn't so clear. Like maybe there has to be a war, but also it would be nice if you knew what was at the other end first, right? Otherwise, what are you doing? And yeah, we're still big fans of Peterson, but yeah, there's some interesting things to note. And I know for those of you who don't know, I'm doing a lot of experiments with AI. It's having a lot of fun. Also, already quite expert at it before it became a big thing. So one of the things I have is a notebook LM, one of these Google tools with all of the transcripts from Maps of Meaning in it. And Gustavs is able to use that earlier today to sort of validate, oh, this isn't in conflict with anything that he said in Maps of Meaning, according to the AI, right? You've always got to caveat a little bit, but also kind of know what I'm doing with AIs. And this is pretty spot on, this one in particular. So yeah, I mean, the question of ultimacy, and of course for us the question of what pattern is playing out here. I like your idea that Peterson's sort of like the materialist to end all materialists, right? He's eating them all, or maybe the materialist to end materialism, right? And in our sort of parlance, materialism is just placing the material above the, we call it ethereal, right? In other words, saying that's the prime mover, or that's the prime reasoning, or that's the place from which to reason material, and therefore it's a huge violation of the Izot question, obviously. But that's what we mean by materialism, not some sort of physicalist reductionist thinking that Dr. Vervaeke talks about, where it's only material. I don't know, the materialists believe in non-material things all the time, and they usually name them like thought, right, or currency. I think these are, quote, non-material things that are actually, quote, materialized and treated, using scientific method and things, using logic, reason, rationality. And that ability for that materialism to explain the world is kind of at an end, right? We're sort of ending that age. A lot of people call this modernity. I think that's a nonsense term. I have a video about that on the channel elsewhere. And so this end of materialism, or the edge of materialism, or the failure of materialism, I think is a better way to think about what's going on. And then beyond that, the question is why, and what sort of patterns and forces are at play. And so to that end, I think we'll just put up your slideshow and you can go through it.
Yeah, Peterson Leviathan himself, I think, yeah, we just mentioned this, that Peterson is ultimately something of a materialist, or he seems to struggle to commit to something, right? So he's sort of in that place. So could he be considered a sea snake? Yes, if we compare him to the other sea snakes. Yeah, so that's the title slide. Can we move on? Do I do that? Do you do that?
I can do it for you.
So, okay, so he praises might and continuity. He's very much uh, he's very much a capitalist. He very much believes in success and in being good and in bettering yourself, in being stronger, in being a better version of yourself today than you were yesterday, and so on. And he believes in continuity very much. He believes in respect for the past. This is where his sort of conservatism comes from, his defense of how we need to preserve that which precedes us, and we have to rescue our father from the underworld and keep the system running, and these sorts of things. Um, those are things that he very much is in favor of. But that being said, that's like a general broad description that he could apply to anyone. He doesn't really talk very much about um how let's say he should do that because he's in Canada and he has a specific history, and then somebody else shouldn't do that. Somebody else should sort of maybe abandon their house and go somewhere else. Like he just in general is very much for the status quo of the past. Um, he doesn't tell people to sort of discern uh, a good ground to stand on from a bad ground to stand on. Is what I think, and I think that's the sort of perspective of an individualist,
Mm.
who ultimately refers back maybe to his father or to his grandfather, but there's no sort of communal reference point, I would say. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's good. I mean, he's always talking about the primacy of the individual, right? And especially early on, he was using this framework around, well, intersectionality ultimately leads back to the individual as the highest value or something, which I very much disagree with, because there's no such thing as an individual, and there never has been, and there never will be. We're born into a world, we come into being into a world, and we're deeply interconnected with that world the whole time, right? Until we leave it, and then we don't know what happens. Or at least some of us don't. And the idea of the individual is, we'll say, the core problem, because when you try to act out or become an individual, you separate yourself from the world, and then you have to make what I guess I would call ridiculous decisions, like, and do I stay in Canada and go down with the ship, or do I leave and save myself, right, and my family, or part of my
Mhm.
family, or whatever, right? Do I join up with the great behemoth that's that's trying to fill one of the roles filled by the failing fourth estate, by joining Daily Wire, or do I keep going on my own as a juggernaut in
Yeah.
YouTube, right? There's all these somewhat ridiculous questions because they can't be made sense of from an individual perspective or a materialist perspective. And like Peterson's a scientist, he's a top-notch researcher for sure. Like just by numbers, before he got popular, he is already one of the top recited or cited researchers in the field. So yeah, he's a materialist. Like those are the tools of materialism, are the tools of science.
Mhm. Mhm. And do you know if he's spoken anything much about let's say from the perspective of a large sea dragon, like eating little sea dragons or little fish or something would be natural, and it would grow
Mhm.
you. In fact, that's a
Right.
process of you bettering yourself. Do you know how he do you know if and how he's spoken about conflict in the sense of how it's sometimes necessary, or do you think he's very much impacted by Gerard and the whole pacifism sort of glosses over that and doesn't talk about
Yeah.
it?
He'd be more in the Girardian camp for sure. Um, I'll have to do a deep dive on Girard again. Uh, let's put that to rest. Yeah, very pacifist. I mean, one of my critiques of Peterson is that he talks a lot about hierarchy, but he doesn't seem to know anything about it. Like he uses the word, but he doesn't have a good definition. He doesn't point it out, right? He just points out what it looks like from the individualist perspective. One lobster's better than the other lobster because he won a fight or something. It's like, well, yeah, true, but like that there are great men. It's like you might be one of them, sir. It might be worth taking that a little bit more seriously, right? And then there is to rope Gerard back into it. There is an exemplification that's done by the fact of being visible. Period. Right now, that doesn't make you a leader, right? But that may make people follow you, and that's dangerous if you're not taking the responsibility for it. This has been one of my critiques. The other critique is, and this is because mimicry is real, right? This is why Gerard has so much power, because he says mimicry, and everybody goes, "Oh yeah, that's right, obviously, right? It's obvious." But no one talked about it, right? They're just neither of them is talking about hierarchy correctly and what mimicry means, and there's implications to that whole framework that I think are skipped over. So that's
Hmm.
what I would say about that. But I don't recall Peterson really talking about, at least not in the early days, where I probably absorbed 98% of his stuff. Um, I don't recall him talking about he talks about getting stronger, but not at the expense of anything, because he's still fundamentally a quote liberal, right? He's still trying
Hmm.
to hold that version of leftism alive.
Right, right, right. All right, let's move on for a bit. I think uh can we do the next? Yeah. All right. So I'll just do an exposition. I did some research on everything Peterson has said about Leviathan or sea dragons and all of these things. And there's different stories that he brings up because this is a recurring pattern, and it's something that he's put in his books, in the Maps of Meaning, very fundamental there, right? The Chaos Dragon and all that. Slay the dragon. This is what he's talking about, and he's very inconsistent across these, and it's been a change through time, because at the beginning of his lectures, way back, if you look on YouTube, it's like 10 years ago, even more. It's very much about Marduk and Tiamat and maybe Jonah and the Pinocchio analysis that he did, I think, of the Disney cartoon. That was huge. So this is in that. Anyway, we'll go through them, and I'll point out the inconsistencies between them, and just how some of it is decent, but I think he's missing really really important stuff.
Yeah, and I just want to point out, this is this is always the way, right? Everyone's got stuff that's right, even if they're stupid and it's by accident. But you have to differentiate. People have a lot of stuff that's right. There's a lot of good stuff, but that doesn't mean everything they talk about is right. And sometimes that's just overreach. Sometimes it's just mistake. But sometimes I would argue in the case of Gerard, they know full well what they're doing, and it's not good. Peterson, obviously, I think it's just overreach or maybe struggle, which is why this exploration is so important, in my opinion.
Yeah. So the first story that comes up is between Tiamat and Marduk, and this is from the Enuma Elish, which is Mesopotamian, I think Babylonian. This is some of his oldest stuff that he researched himself, I think. It's really fundamental for him. It's primary. All of the other stories that that he analyzes and so on, he puts them all within the framework of Tiamat and Marduk. That often does not make sense to do later on, and I will point that out. But the story is that there's a crisis in the spiritual world, and Tiamat, who is the dragon, Tiamat, the sea dragon, the chaos personified, anthropomorphized, is creating a lot of problems. Marduk arrives. Marduk beats Tiamat, chops her up into little pieces, and from those pieces come the earth, like the the solid ground. This is a common motif. I think many sort of different stories have this kind of thing of somebody coming up, and then in the primordial ocean you get bits of land or something. And he references this a lot. He points to psychology about how, I might get this wrong, but it's like the Jungian ego and the superego and the subconscious. And Tiamat in this diagrams represents the unconscious, and then how you have to go out there and conquer it, go out into the unknown and conquer chaos and impose order on chaos. Otherwise, the chaos will encroach upon you, and then you will slowly, well, not slowly, slowly, and then suddenly you will die. You will be really brought down by it. And Peterson calls this the creation narrative, the creation of the world. The creation of the world comes from this conquering of chaos by order, by virtue and courage, and going out into the world. In Christianity, this is not the case. And even in the Enuma Elish, this is actually not the case. In the Enuma Elish, there is a creation that precedes this, and then Tiamat and Marduk are like the second generation down in the spiritual world. There's that they have spiritual parents of their own, but Peterson really focuses in on this as the important act of creation. I don't know where he gets it from. Probably some viewer can help us with that. But yeah, so in Christianity, for example, God creates prime manner, and they are not opposites. They are not co-eternal or anything like that. It's not like there's no two, what do you call them, primary substances or something.
Right. Yeah, it's not
That's
a binary. And then it sounds like Peterson's starting middle out. Then even in this story, I have a video on middle out thinking. So that might be relevant. Yeah, this idea that that you're not starting at the, we'll say, original creation, or you're recreating the original creation. My thesis is that Sam Harris and Dawkins and guys like that do this with creation begins with their consciousness, like their personal private perspective consciousness. Peterson is a bit more nuanced, right? So he's still an upgrade. And I guess your argument is more like, yeah, but you're not actually starting at the creation. I put all of that under the umbrella of creation denial, right? In other words, we have a creation story. We're just denying that we have one and rewriting it instead. And that's causing a lot of this middle out thinking, because if you start with your consciousness, obviously there was something here before you were conscious. I mean, I don't know what else to say. It was pretty easy, right? Like you were born and there was stuff already here and you're within it. So you're smaller than it. Like all those things should apply. Even a materialist should be able to figure that one out. They don't seem to be able to figure it out. So I'll just tell them. I guess that's my only option. But that idea that you're rewriting it, you're using some other cultures version of the same pattern, by the way, to your point, and maybe misusing it because whatever. It's easy to misunderstand other cultures' ways of thinking about things. This is outlined in a book by Nesbitt called The Geography of Thought. Everybody should read that book to know understand how stupid you really are about other cultures, and why that's the case, and why it's important, and why you can't do all that much about it. And that's okay. Like there's no problem there. So yeah, I can definitely see all of that.
Right, yes. So the Book of Job. This is also something that Peterson talks about. It's and the Book of Job is in the Bible. It's one of the oldest texts in the Bible.
Mm.
People don't have no idea how old it is. It's really old, and we know the story. Job is a good guy, and then he suffers. Sort of, there's God and Satan involved, and then there's a lot of discussion. Most of the book is honestly just monologues, dialogues, lectures about good and evil and causality and why things happen and so on. And then at the end, God shows up and shows Job Leviathan and Behemoth, these two massive beasts of creation, and gives a very long description of them. And Job just goes on with his life after that, pretty much. Um, the book ends somewhat abruptly. And Peterson takes this story and appropriates the bit about Leviathan to the Marduk and Tiamat story completely inappropriately, completely.
Hmm.
Um, it's just taking a sea monster and then interpreting it as though God is Marduk and then Leviathan is Tiamat, and how God is shutting Job up by telling him Leviathan was this great, and that's the chaos that I slew at the beginning of creation. So you are nothing in comparison to Tiamat, to Leviathan, or to me,
Mm.
pretty much. And and
Mm.
and and he does this whole light and darkness, and how there's this primordial waters, which are the tohu wabohu, and then the tohu has to do with Tiamat. And I'm not saying there's not a connection there, but that whole story of how between chaos and Tiamat and Leviathan, there is a connection there for sure. But
Right.
of God slaying Tiamat at the beginning of the world, no, I disagree.
Right.
Leviathan sticks around.
Right. And you're right. That's a mirror of the middle out story from Mesopotamia. And
Hmm.
yeah, that's a really good catch. I mean, that's that individualism, right? Where are you in the hierarchy as an individual, which is his lobster story all over again, right? This lobster beat you, therefore this is the quote alpha lobster or whatever. Which, the alpha stuff was always nonsense, by the way. For those of you who don't know, that isn't how wolf packs work, but you know, close enough, I guess. Yeah, I mean, his reading is very much in keeping with not only individualism, but his complete um, failure to represent a deep hierarchy. For him, hierarchy is just one thing above you because combat or something, right? And so you've pointed out there's the combat element here. There's the recapitulation, and so it would be a good thing, right? But he's tying together. It's sort of Joseph Campbell-esque, by the way. I wish Joseph Campbell had never been born. Um, in that Campbell-esque way, right? Tying together these mythos, and again, cultures are very hard to understand, so you got to be careful. I don't think Peterson's careful about that at all in this case. And yeah, I mean, I think that I haven't read Job at all. But my understanding is that basically the point of showing him the beasts is to say, look what I created, not who are you to question the person that created something that is contained within your world with you, and is so much greater. Not, not I'm better than you. It's like, how would you understand something this much bigger than you that is embedded with you, that I also am responsible for? What thing are you responsible for that would give you the perspective to understand something like this? Yeah, I think that's probably the my impression of what the point is at the end of Job, but you would know better than I would.
It's a difficult story. Let's move on. So Pinocchio. This is also a fan favorite of Peterson's, right? I really love it, and this has to do with the story of Horus and Osiris. That's also a pretty famous Peterson bit about how Osiris is this king of the gods, or of Egypt, of the pantheon, and how he's getting old, and I don't remember exactly, but it ends up with him being blind and getting I think it was getting chopped into pieces or something. I don't remember. Anyway, the story is that Horus has to go and rescue his father, and bring the pieces back together and put things into order when things have degenerated.
Mhm.
Um, and Pinocchio, well, at least the part of Pinocchio that Peterson talks most about going to the belly of the whale, to the bottom of the ocean, to rescue his father. He puts that into that frame. And he says that yeah, that you have an existing structure, that you have a kingdom, for example, and then over time the kingdom becomes, it becomes proud, it becomes, well, no, actually no, that's not the case. He says, Peterson says that a kingdom degenerates due to order just falling apart a little bit, chaos creeping in, corruption creeping in. He specifically used the word corruption,
Mm.
and he uses the word entropy. I would say that yes, it sort of does happen naturally, but it's more of like due to a natural pride and forgetfulness and things like that, that people kind of become a little bit less grateful about where they came from, and what the spirit is that gave them their kingdom. Anyway, the king ends up in the underworld, and he doesn't really know how he got there, and it's quite a bad situation. And then the son must be courageous and go out into the chaos and slay it and restore the father to where he should be, so that proper order is maintained, so that the king is in the kingdom, not outside in the dungeon or the cave or something, or the swamp. And
Right.
and there was a pretty viral, actually, Jordan Peterson clip from the Joe Rogan Experience. I'm sure everybody saw it. People were really laughing about it, about how I think Peterson may have been getting emotional, but he was talking about how whale carcasses, they sort of accumulate stuff, and then they get rotten and they rot, and then we need to go out into the carcass and restore and find the animating spirit that generated it, and put it to its proper place. And this has to do with that, actually. I mean, maybe he used the wrong terms or something, and that's definitely a Peugeot inspired thing as well, because Peugeot did a video about, I think it was the Princess and the Frog, the one where the frog has to go down into the pond to
Mhm.
get the pearl, right? That's also an example of the story. Um, and so in this story, the Leviathan is simply the Leviathan represents the bottom of the ocean, representing total chaos and disorder, the underworld.
Mhm.
So that's what it is. It's that you live in a normal state, and then due to entropy and corruption, you fall into a forgetful and underworld state, and then your son comes and rescues you and brings things back to order. So
Right.
Leviathan honestly isn't even a huge person in this story.
Yeah, and I think ultimately, what makes kingdoms or governments, or however you want to frame it, corrupt over time, is that they lose the values and the virtue virtuous people to uphold them. And that's due to a loss of telos or telos, however you want to pronounce it. I pronounce it telos because I like tea, and it's not that hard. I also use time, energy, and attention quite a bit, so that's tea. It's a make final cause great again argument. You know, you need to make final cause great all the time in your kingdom or in your government, right? In order to have a good government. Because if you're not continually revivifying, like this is the part of Peterson that's right, you've got to continually revivify, right? Which is it's a little puzzling why Peterson Academy. Like, no, you had the right answer. Why are you competing with it? Why are you trying to, and the argument could be something like, well, I'm showing them a better way to do this. And I would be like, no, the best thing about colleges and universities is not the lectures, not even if they're the best lectures ever, still not the lectures. It's very, what we say around here, age of gnosis, right? It's very, propositions are the highest value, and propositions can do all the work, like gives the right propositions, and magic, actual magic, like actual voice magic or word magic happens. And that's ridiculous. No. And you see that age of gnosis sort of propositions is the highest value propositions is the thing that's going to solve the problem everywhere. That's why I'm not a huge fan of Peterson Academy project, because I think he's just competing with the universities on their weakest point. And that's not great. That's not great at all. And so this idea of revivification, he has it, but he doesn't seem to know what to do with it. I think that's the loss of that deep hierarchical understanding that causes that, right? Where hierarchy, just choose the biggest lobster. There's only two lobsters. One of them is bigger than the other. It's like, well, it's a very simple way to understand the world, and it's not necessarily wrong, and it's very helpful for sure. Everything Peterson does pretty much is helpful, right? But it doesn't go far enough in explaining or solving the domicide. Where do you belong in the world? Because not everybody, it turns out, I don't know if you know this, Gustavs, some families have more than one son. Which son is supposed to go down and save, right? Well, that's not clear. Peterson doesn't give you a path for that. He's only ever dealing with two objects. And that is an advantage in some ways, and a disadvantage, I think, in the ways you're pointing out here.
Yeah, revivification. That's the key word. So Jonah is very similar to Pinocchio. Jonah also famously features a whale that swallows Jonah in the ocean, and it's biblical, so it's got even more what do you call it, authority or something. So it's a pretty good story to analyze, symbolically, mythologically, all that. So again, the belly of the whale is total chaos. It's the extreme. It's as far away as you can go from order in Peterson's view. I disagree, but in Peterson's view, the whale is as far away as you can go from order. It's out there. It's in the very deep depth. It's in space terms. It's like in the black hole. And the way Peterson talks about this story is that that it's a story about conscience, about listening to your conscience, and doing what's right, even if it's difficult, because you need to follow your conscience, and it frequently tells you to do difficult things. So Jonah is told by God to go to Nineveh, and Peterson changes this to being that he doesn't listen to his conscience, and he ends up in the belly of the whale at the bottom of the ocean because he doesn't listen to his conscience, and he ends up running away from where destiny is calling him.
Wow.
So yeah. So he ends up there, and then he ends up back on dry land and goes to Nineveh, and that's framed as purely, well, maybe not purely, but it's framed as Jonah having a moment of repentance and turning around and saying that no, he will follow his destiny from the depths back to where he was originally called, and Peterson links this back to self-examination and how we need to be constantly listening to our conscience and self-examining with respect to it. And that if we do that, then and I think this is actually him sort of avoiding revivification, because he's trying to fit it all into himself. How sort of he's trying to how he's trying to avoid the getting into the belly of the whale in the first place. So
Yeah,
that's in Jonah.
solving the problem by avoiding the problem, right? It's like maybe it's not a problem and there's a lesson, but but yeah, right. And also flattening the hierarchy back down to the individual, and then this invented, conscious term and consciousness, and this conscience. These are all Cudworth invented terms, very recent. Um, that's interesting. I hadn't seen that, but man, now that you say it, it's like holy cats, how dangerous. Right, flattening this creation story is still like the creator's talking here, down to no, it's just a voice inside your head. Right, we're in having mode now in Dr. Vivigi's terms. Um,
Yeah, and what I want to say. Oh man, I just want to say something, but I forgot.
that's that's all right. That happens in these live exploration streams. Um, yeah, squishing it down to this idea that it's within you, it's part of you, and putting in this individualistic frame when the story is explicitly no, there's a force outside of yourself. If you can reduce it to force, I always struggle trying to secularize these things because secular language doesn't work. That's the end of materialism, baby. Um, you know, this thing that is calling to you or guiding you is not within yourself, which is weird because in Pinocchio, it's explicitly not within himself, right? And so he gets it wrong there in Jonah, which is just it's strange. But I hadn't seen that before. That's a good catch. That's a good catch because I never caught that. That there's the individualism right there in the flat
Yeah,
world. And
well, they're very similar, but in Jonah, there's no like person there to save him. Yeah, like
right,
in Pinocchio. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
there's no personified exterior agent
Yeah.
guiding. It's just, yeah, it's more direct access. Yeah.
Okay, then there's the Beast of Revelation, which is, I would say, it's like a completely different category as the other Leviathans, as the other sea monsters. But Peterson and Peugeot do also call it Leviathan. And I think they get tangled up in that themselves a little bit
Mm.
because because the thing is, the Beast of Revelation Leviathan has to do with. I would recommend you watch Peugeot's videos on sort of the Beast system, and he did a couple of those back during the scamdemic, and they were pretty good. So that sort of explains the Beast. It's this order of really tyrannical control over uh, a material of society, just that is super disordered. So you have a society that's very disordered, but then you have a system of technology and things like that that really tightly keep things existing.
Mhm.
Right. So they also call this Leviathan, and I think this is because it's a big monster. It's sort of apocalyptic and symbolic and biblical, and it also due to Hobbes, Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan, which had to do with this nation state idea and liberalism and so on. I never read it, but it's in there and it's called that. So I think
Hobbes
they
is a
get really.
monster. Hobbes is a monster here. He's an idiot. So
Uh,
don't read it. You don't need to.
all
It's
right,
garbage.
all right, yeah. So this Leviathan, this beast Leviathan of Revelation, is a monster of extreme order, right? It's actually the opposite. And then when they start talking about this, then it's suddenly how do we maintain a bit of looseness in in society? How do we run away from extreme order? How do we not slide into all the regimes of the 20th century and all of this thing? But it's like using the same word Leviathan is very inconsistent, and I don't see how they properly reconcile it. They try to reconcile it by saying that it's the extreme chaos that then brings about the extreme tyranny.
Mm.
But it just doesn't, like, you're running towards Leviathan, and then the Leviathan is actually in the order that comes about of it. I don't know. It doesn't work with the previous conception, and uh, yeah,
It's
that's That's the
self
beast.
self-referential, right? Looks like we're talking about like there's three different beasts here, or at least the nature of one of them is changed as the result of revelation or something. Um, whatever interpretation you want to use, this doesn't really matter. It's not the same. Like things have changed, and therefore labeling it the same becomes an issue in terms of understanding and informing yourself as to what let's say the clear true message would be. Not saying anybody has access to that directly. I'm just saying that at least as a thesis, that's kind of out there, and yeah, it's sort of important to get your monsters right at some level, to know whether or not they're good monsters or bad monsters. They might be dog-headed, and the dog-headed might be able to save the world when no one else is. Who knows? We're big believers of that here, and that might be super important. And I think that one of the issues that you run into when you have these sorts of confusions is that you're misappropriating the archetypes, and that just doesn't allow you to tie the world together correctly. And I mean, this is part of the domicile problem we're having, is that people don't know how to discern and identify and locate themselves in the world. And if you can't locate the monsters, you're going to be anxious no matter where you are. Like that's going to cause actual anxiety in your life.
Yeah. So then, yeah, just on to Peterson as the Leviathan. Peterson is not grounded in anything particular. He exists, he's big, he's strong, he's powerful, but he doesn't have a solid ground beneath his feet. He can slip and fall at some point. He doesn't, because, or at least not that much, because he can just push back just as strong as anybody pushing him. But he doesn't have ground beneath his feet, and uh, he's been talking about reconciling, yeah, sort of Christianity. He has lots of Christians around him, but the best he can seem to do is some sort of Platonism or Neoplatonism, and that has a lot to do with how yeah, he says that being is good. That's something that he's trying to get people to agree upon, is that being is good, and that's the, I mean, I agree, but that's the highest thing that he's really striving towards, and I would say that's quite Leviathan-like, is that we can get existence for existence's sake, that it's like a good thing. Um, being is good. And another thing is that just like a big sea monster, he doesn't really seem to encourage people to sacrifice for the sake of others. It's generally when he talks about sacrifice and about self-sacrifice, he's only talking about self-sacrifice for his own sake or for your own sake. You should self-sacrifice for your own sake. You need to let go of your um, ideas about the future, your ideas about who you are, about what you need when you discover that there's something bigger. Because in sacrificing your misconceptions, you can then get something much better. And how to get bigger and better things, you need to be able to sacrifice for them. How you need to do that. He, I watched like an hour of these things, and I didn't see, and I was watching for it to
Mm.
see him talk about sacrifice for other people
Mm.
and self-sacrifice for other people. He didn't do it, not a single time. And when he did talk about sacrificing for other people, it was mainly in the terms about the chimps, about how the chimp leader is the leader because he sacrifices for other people, how he's generous. But
Mm.
then he puts all of that in the sort of how being generous is good because then they'll be generous back to you. That's always how
Right.
he goes back to it.
Well, that
Always.
that I think you've sorry to interrupt, but like I think you've hit on something, right? Generosity is not seen by leftists as sacrifice, right? But it should be. Like generosity is still giving
Mm,
something up. But the leftists never see it that way. The people who identify against, that's roughly leftists, never see it that way. That's really insightful. That's super helpful. And again, this is another thing I missed this. This is good stuff. I totally missed that his sacrifice is, the way he couches it is you're sacrificing for future self or future Homer.
Yes.
As he, I like that. Yeah, I love the future Homer thing. That was fantastic by Peterson. Yeah, you're right. You're never sacrificing like specifically for others. That's fascinating. And yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
generosity, which that's not. If you're generous, you have stuff to be generous with, so you're not sacrificing, right? Right? Like, no, it's incorrect.
Hmm.
Generosity is sacrifice. I like that. That's really interesting. That's that boy. The idea that you don't know that generosity is still a form of sacrifice, that explains a lot of leftist behavior all by itself. That's kind of
Hmm.
fascinating.
I guess. And in terms of talking about Peterson as Leviathan, there's this image sort of I'm looking at aspects of Leviathan and then projecting them back onto Peterson, and about how the biggest fish in the sea eat all of the smaller ones, and yeah, it's like Peterson is eating all of these little fish alive, and they deserve it, and that's good for us. That's good for
Mm,
us. Like we should be grateful for that, and we are sort of grateful, and we're really happy, and everybody's like Team Peterson, yeah, let's go. um and this I think links into how Paul van der Klee, I think he probably lifted this from somewhere else, but there was this talk about how who is Peterson, which team is he on, what is he doing, and there's this passage in the Gospel of Mark, I think, where some of Jesus's disciples go to Jesus and tell him that there's a man exorcising demons somewhere in the other region somewhere, and who is he? Is he our friend? He doesn't seem to know you. And Jesus says that, well, if he's I forget what Jesus says, but it's something more like, he's not against us, so he's with us, or something more like that. Actually, I should find
mm,
this. Sorry, but Paul van der Klee referred to Peterson as an unauthorized exorcist for quite a while,
right.
because that's who this person is. Is this person who isn't, um, uh, oh my goodness, I should find this.
He's not sanctioned or authorized
Yeah,
explicitly,
but he's doing good. But he's doing good.
but he's doing good
Yeah,
nonetheless. Right. Right.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, like a fish that eats the smaller sharks. Sure, yeah, but I think maybe at this point he's kind of run out of food, you know.
So who are the smaller fishes in this scenario? Because I obviously I
Like
like.
the Sam Harris and the Richard Dawkinses and all
Okay.
of those little fish feed, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then we're big fans here of this idea of the dog-headed, which we think Peterson falls into. Um, and to that end, everybody should just buy a dog-headed book from my shop, obviously, and any number of other awesome things. Um, so in some ways, I would cast that as this. I don't want to classify it as it will say a problem, but um, the fourth estate at some point fell. Right, we can argue about when. Obviously, of course, I have a video about this already. Right, so the fourth estate falls, and that creates a problem, right? And then the problem is this fracturing or shattering of media itself. And because media was conveying authority, whether they were authoritative or not is kind of irrelevant at this point. The market, if you will, or the landscape, I think is more what I want to say, gets flooded with players, with people telling you things. And so your thesis is that Peterson's gobbling that market up, eating those smaller fishes who are, they're all pseudo intellectuals, honestly. So he's
Yep.
eating that market up, right? And that's causing him to grow. But now so your thesis is now he's at a point where there's nothing for him to do except eat himself, because his
Yeah.
ideas are not foundational enough, or they're not built on the right foundation to continue any further. And so you just kind of hit hit the hard limit or something. Is that am I
Yeah,
getting
yeah,
that right?
yep. Exactly, exactly. And that's the snake eating its own tail. I don't know. Have we seen that much in Peterson? I don't think we've seen it that much, to be honest.
He keeps getting sick,
Or do you? That's true. That's true
and
though. Yeah.
he keeps getting called out for what do you believe and not being able to answer it. So I would call these limiting factors or constraints or stopping factors that
Yeah.
cause him to spin in self-reference. Particularly, although I understand Jubilee is a big problem. His Jubilee interview, I thought that really, it wasn't the only time it got highlighted, but I thought that really highlighted his inability to move past, right? And now he sort of has to rely on, his previous statements to boost his previous statements, which can only get you so far. But I still big fans. We're still Peterson Sphere aficionados here, so it's still useful. It just has a limit, and maybe we're seeing that limit.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We'll see. So, I just did a little diagrammatic thing. This is like one of those Mathieu-Peugeot diagrams almost. So there's two diagrams, as you can see. There's one on the top, and there's one below. And this is the Marduk and the creation story sort of narrative. Like it's not quite the creation ones, but the Marduk and Tiamat. So on the top there's Marduk and Tiamat is the bigger ball because Tiamat's the big fearsome dragon, and Marduk's the small one, and they're fighting. And then Marduk beats Tiamat and chops her into little pieces, and then forms the earth over which he is king. So you actually start with a binary that is sort of equal and in opposition, and then you get a verticalization of it, and then one becomes the earth and one becomes the heaven. Um, and this is generally just how I think Peterson views the world: is that you have to fight things and then you have to subsume them. And on the bottom diagram, you have this sort of order and chaos thing about how in the beginning there was a little bit of order and lots of chaos, and then the order won. The light beat the light power beat the dark power, and then the light power sort of grew in magnitude, and the dark power retreats. And that's this whole chaos and order, and about maintaining, keeping your room clean, and things like that. But it's very binary,
Yeah.
and yeah,
Yeah, and you get stuck in that binary thinking. So I put the link up to that video. And you see that pattern everywhere. And I've been linking this recently to a deficit, a cognitive deficit, that maybe people can only hold one positive thing in their head at once, and the other thing has to be negative, which is why they can't think about or go to the third option or the third way, as I like to talk about. I'll have to do a video on the third way
yeah,
and demonstrate that, because I don't
yeah.
know why it's confusing to people, but it seems to be that's an interesting catch that, sort of all along, I didn't really see it that way. All along, he's stuck in this binary frame the whole time. That's fascinating.
Well, and it's and actually, like the story here, it isn't a bad story. It's just not the story of the creation of the world.
Right.
And the story does happen, but it's not the creation. It's not the ultimate initial primordial primary creation of the world, of the universe, of the cosmos.
It's not the true beginning.
It's not the true beginning. It happens later down the line where I don't know. There's like David and Goliath and all these other stories of how two powers fight and then one wins and then the other one gets turned into to fodder for the other people, and you have lots of this all around the world. You could honestly you could look at this story, for example, as the conquistadors and the Aztecs. How the conquistadors fought
Mm,
the Aztecs and they beat their demons, and then yeah, you get a kingdom later on, and the conquistadors are the kings, and that's how that little part of the world goes on to do its thing. But it's not the creation of the world.
interesting. Yeah, I like that. I like that perspective.
Yeah, yeah. And once it's done, sort of once that fight has been won, you don't need to keep refighting that same fight. You can kind of move on a bit,
Mm,
and you can maintain that. You can maintain that structure, and you can revivify it. You don't have to refight the whole war again and again. You can have smaller maintenance things done, and you can have maybe smaller rebellions, conflicts, politicking, and so on. But you don't have to redo that same fight again. Yeah.
That's a
Sorry.
good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Trapped in a double binary, right? The binary of, oh, it's a binary, or oh, it's revivification, right? Because revivification is a type of cooperation, not a type of opposition. The binary, to your earlier point, always leads to opposition. It has no choice. If you're stuck in a binary, there's going to be a good guy and a bad guy. There's going to be a thing to fight, and both sides are going to see them as the righteous ones or something, right? As the right answer, or the truth, or whatever. But you can just revivify and cooperate instead, and the cooperation fixes the opposition, because you can't have opposition and cooperation. You pick one. So,
yeah. So I just think the diagram of the yin yang diagram of order and chaos works really well here, and I've just put into it what I think I see in it. You have you have the largest worlds, and if I remember correctly, the black is the yang, the masculine principle, the order principle, I think. And yeah, you just have a structure of a cosmological structure of the world here. You have dry land, you have the ocean, which is marginal, and it's quite big, and it's chaotic. The ocean is chaotic, but the Leviathan is not chaos itself. The Leviathan is actually order, but it's order that's apart from you. It's order that is in the chaos. It's relatively small but significant. It's that, but it is ordered, and its intentions are not your intentions. You're not necessarily friends, but it is order. It is order. It's a little pirate ship out there, right? The pirate ship has order, but it's not part of the main kingdom. It's got its own intentions, and it's doing things, but you die in chaos, right? Generally speaking,
it's dog-headed. It's in the margins. It's dog-headed. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's something that that Peterson, Peterson is not necessarily like, is Peterson grateful that the whale saves Pinocchio and his father, right? Because that's another thing. Like they just assume that it's like some sort of, it's some sort of underground cave or something that's taken for granted. But no, like Pinocchio's father, Geppetto, is saved by the whale in the ocean, right? Like it's
He's saved
it's
from
it's not
the
something
ocean.
safe. Yeah,
In the same way
he's saved
Jonah
from the
was
ocean.
preserved from the ocean by the whale. Right. Okay.
Yeah,
There's the pattern.
yeah. If it was some ultimate state of non-existence or of chaos, then they wouldn't have survived. But there is something to be grateful for the Leviathan, because it is order. Because people die in chaos, and they don't die in the whale, right? And they yeah, and that's just how I see this. And then the little white spot in the dry land, I don't know. That's like, I don't know, a lake. I don't know.
Well, that's all right. We're just here to point out the patterns, not to, we'll say,
Yeah.
resolve all the elements of a given symbol. So I think
Yeah.
we're on safe ground. We didn't make claims we were going to solve the yin yang in Western terms today or anything, because
No.
that was not going to
But
happen.
then in the next slide, I show what Peterson sees in the yin yang. He doesn't see the dry land. He's rejecting it. There is dry land. There is creation. There are existing large systems of the world with billions of people in them over thousands of years, and he rejects to be there. He wants to be in this place where he is the order, and around him everywhere is chaos, and that makes him the Leviathan. It puts him in a place in the world where he must be the Leviathan, because he's rejecting the dry land.
Wow. Yeah. No, that makes sense, right? And the individual, that's what it is. I'm the primary. I'm the thing that is the order, and I stand outside of, even though I'm surrounded by, but it doesn't consume me, the chaos, right? So the chaos surrounds me, but I'm the individual inside the chaos, and I'm outside of it in a way because I'm ordered, right? And yeah, this is part of the individualism, right? And it's also part of that quote hero's journey nonsense that Campbell invented and is completely, totally, and utterly wrong in all possible ways. I got to do that video. Some one of these days I'll get up to it. Yeah, that idea that the individual is fighting the chaos by the mere existence of the individual is very much in Peterson's work. That's why the self-help is individual based and self-referential and all of this. That's interesting. I like that a lot.
Yeah, and there's this whole thing about how in the Bible there's this line that's quite beautiful, that talks about how there's this cosmological structure of the world, and then there's the ocean, and in the ocean the Leviathan is playing, right? And then we have Peterson, whose big thing is playing. It's play. This existence with the order and the disorder, it's play. And so I think that kind of brings it together nicely. And yeah, the zoomed in portion here is, I think, like Peterson's world, right? That's his world. The dry land is his somewhere out there. It's not for him.
Yeah. Yeah, just to give people a little more time with this, just because it is significant. Yeah, I only saw these slides like an hour and a half ago or something. So this is quite a surprise to hear this last slide explained, because Gustavs warned me. He said, no, the good slide's the last one, and I saw it, but I couldn't quite put it together the way he did. Obviously, that was the sort of the point of this particular live stream. And all these exploratory live streams, this is where we're going. They have a different format from my Friday live streams. They have a different format from my recorded videos, right? They're all they have a different format for my conversations, like the ones I did with Adam and some of the early ones with Manuel. So yeah, I mean, that's a great case at the end for why he is representative of the Leviathan and why it's a small slice of the world. And without that, we'll call it the self-similar fractal reality or something, you run into a problem, right? And yeah, so I mean, I'm a little shocked we didn't get a little bit more audience engagement and questions and stuff, but maybe that's because your presentation was really good and it's super understandable now. Now that you've done the explanation, and that's an impressive job to do in like 22 hours or whatever it was. So I don't even think it was a full day. Yeah, and so what motivated you towards this idea? Because we, like I said, you sort of dropped it on me yesterday, and I felt like I had been nuked from orbit by an intercontinental ballistic missile of some kind. But what led you down this path towards this way of understanding Peterson and seeing this set of patterns?
I think it's just I think it's yours. I mean, it's just your stuff on the Peterson trick. That's it.
Oh, my latest Peterson trick video. Yeah. Okay, maybe that's cool.
No, I don't think it was the no, it was the earlier one about
the earlier one.
That Peterson does.
What, I have 4? Yeah, I've got like 3 or 4 of those now. I don't remember them all. I gotta fix. I have 420 plus videos on the channel now, so brain is full. So well, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, again, I try to be careful because Peterson's a great man. He's done great things, and anybody that tries to take that away, in my mind, should be strung up or something. But that's why I'm not in charge, I guess, which is too bad, actually, because I could fix a lot of things pretty quick. I always did the whole time I was consulting. Yeah, at some point though, you have to take a critical look and make adjustments. And I think that is really what Peterson struggles with, because we're all about orientation here, right? And he's always has to flip his orientation when he's asked what I would call a very easy question, which is, do you believe in, people frame it wrong. I would say, don't ask people if they believe in God. Ask if they believe in a pre-existing creator of order, right? Because that's like what we're living in is a created order. And then that fixes evolution. Oh, okay, there's a created order. That's the telos, if you will, of evolution. It's going towards some kind of created order, and we're tiny short-lived creatures who don't live in evolution. We live as the result, right, or beneath it, of evolution in this time and place, and then that something happens, it ends in some fashion, right? And so our ability to understand, we'll say, the forward path of evolution is severely limited. And my argument would be the study of that is not something completely stupid and scientific sounding and also utterly wrong, like metaphysics. See my video on why I hate the word meta, or at least the popular usage of it. It's more like religion, right? Religion is the way to understand the forward progress of humans as such, or maybe even being as such, if you want to put it in the best secular terms that I'm capable of anyway. It's still religion. That's why I reject this idea of, well, what's your metaphysics? It's nonsense talk. Like, let's be more clear about what we're talking. Everything is not a science and can't be ontologized. You can't just say the thing outside of physics or beyond physics or past physics. Do you mean the thing physics is embedded in? Because that would be the same thing. Well, that's religion. Everything's embedded in religion. It's not that hard, right? So that plain speak is a bit more important. So what do you think then? So I'm happy to hear my critiques of Peterson, or my way of explaining Peterson to people, and some of the great things he did, so that we can do more great things. The goal of that is to, be able to properly repeat and represent his pattern, right, over and over again, to help more people. What's your takeaway from your little slideshow analysis, or what do you think other people's takeaways should be? What are you hoping to get out of this particular presentation?
I think just a richer view of the world. I think the view of self versus outside is pretty nasty, and it's quite limited, and oftentimes it's actually not exactly what Peterson says. Sometimes he
Right.
makes analogies which are a bit different, and are more commonly sort of less, I don't know, like liberal, libertarian, self as self versus outside. Sometimes he doesn't emphasize that so much, but that really is this sort of, fish against the ocean. Inside versus chaos, or order versus chaos mentality. Um, I think just seeing that there's a different option, that you can be on dry land somewhere, um, which is very different.
Mm.
Uh, it's where you can take for granted that there's some order around you. Actually, you can for a little bit, right? You can. Eventually, yes, it will shrink, but you can for a while. And there's other people around you, and you can generally trust them and things like that sometimes. Like, there are places like that in the world. You just have to make sure that you're there, and then you can do that.
Well, and I think, the big gap in pretty much all of Peterson's work is he, again, because he doesn't really define hierarchy very well beyond like this binary individualistic viewpoint. He can't tell you how to discern where to be, right? So a lot of people will make what I think of ridiculous arguments like homeschool your kids. I'm like, but that's not, it's not practical for everybody. And it's also quite unnecessary for a bunch of people because their schools are not infected. Like, all schools are not the same in the United States. Those schools may not be infected. And also, even if they are, if they're not heavily infected, there's more effective ways to send your kid to those schools, which I think is important. The quote knowledge is not important, but friendship building, relationship building, cooperation, all of that also happens at school. That's super important. Like, that's where all the juice is, right? Um, so if you don't know whether or not your school is good enough that it's safe to send your children there, that's a problem, right? And the solution isn't homeschool necessarily. It might be switching schools because there's one that's much better or better enough or something, right? It also, might be alternatives around sending them to relatives to go to better schools, right? Rather than trying to school them yourself. Like there are other solutions, which I have watched my whole life. People, you think schools being bad in the United States is a new thing, do you? It ain't. I'm just gonna tell you, I've watched this play out. My cousin's homeschooled, for example. He was lucky enough to be able to be home to homeschool them while his wife worked, which, whatever. It's a little strange, but yeah, even Catholics get, there are exceptions to every rule. We're all dog-headed here, so it's fine. But Peterson's not giving the skills of discernment, right? That's what I'm trying to do, among other things, right? Discernment. So to fight the domicide, like, you got to know where you fit in and why and what you can do to fit in there. And Peterson, because he's not talking about hierarchy correctly, and he's not talking about the depth of hierarchy, he also can't give you the tools to participate in a hierarchy in the right way for you and for the hierarchy, because it has to be mutually affording, if we want to switch into Reiki language real quick. Otherwise, what are we doing? Right. And then after we understand that and get that down, which is a lot of work, and I hate to give 2 steps at once when I'm very big on small steps, one at a time. Then we can start talking about where are the places where we have to bend the societal rules or create special societal rules for the people that there's no mutuality that's going to happen, right? Or the mutuality is harder to see, right? Well, maybe someone's got a physical disability. Well, they need all the things you and I need, right? They still need a way to work, right? They need a way to fit in. They need all these things. And so, maybe the laws against child slavery or some ridiculously nonsense frame that almost never happened, at least not in the United States, historically speaking, is used to justify also not hiring people of limited intelligence or limited physical abilities, or whatever limitations they have. Those 2 things conflict all the time here, where they change the laws, and now all of a sudden a bunch of disabled people can't get work because they want, basically, the minimum wage goes up too much, right? Or the laws in place are too strict, or whatever. And then those businesses can't participate in helping those disabled people anymore. And the government solution, as it often is materialistic. Well, we'll just pay them money to stay home. No, we need to know how to participate with each other in a created order, in a way that the right amount of sacrifice is done, and we have the right amount of mutual interaction. And that is something that's completely missing from Peterson's worldview or world model, or his map of meaning, if you will, right?
Yes. Yeah, and I think there's just a real difficulty for him in urging people to fight chaos and go towards order, and then having to go the other way afterwards, about the beast of revelation and how we have too much order and how it'll impose tyranny and cause that it's the sort of slavery, right? Because the slavery is the bad thing. The slavery is the thing
Right.
that the Egyptians were running, that the Jews in Egypt were running from, the Hebrews, and that's sort of the other thing that we have to go away from. And so you end up being in the middle, which is a pretty bad place to be, I would say. Like, especially when you're supposed to be striving for something, when you're supposed to be looking higher.
Right. Well, I mean, if you see being in the middle as an imposition, then you're not using your position in the middle to draw together heaven and earth or something, or the ethereal and material, however you want to frame it. So I think that's sort of significant. Also, yeah, I mean, when you have these warped ideas of what slavery is, because you think there's a state of generosity that doesn't require sacrifice on the part of the other person to equalize the world, yeah, you're going to get a very warped sort of view of how things work, especially if, again, you center it around the so-called individual, which it's an impossible thing to be an individual, and you're separating yourself from the world, rather than, or you're opposing the world, rather than accepting it. And I'll just note, all of these people talk about education, and they all talk about Western canon, and they all talk about old books. And of course, I do have a video on this in my Plato Republic playlist. Plato is pretty clear about what causes tyranny. The thing that causes tyranny, it's in the middle of book 8, is called democracy. That's what causes tyranny. I am sorry, guys. Also, that democracy brought you such wonderful things as Saddam Hussein and Hitler, who was elected twice, once as chancellor and once as chancellor for life. Democracy is not this wonderful thing that everybody claims to be. It's just this way of empowering the individual by appealing to lots of individuals agreeing politically or something. It's a very bizarre frame for the world, and it's wrong. The Roman Republic lasted because it's called the Roman Republic and not the Roman democracy. And that doesn't mean you, obviously, for example, in the US, you don't have democratic elements within your republic, right? Because this is a democratic republic. It's not a democracy. It's a democratic republic. Read the Founding Father papers. It's not that hard. And it is unique. For sure, we have the federal government and state governments. Sure, there's a democratic element, and sometimes that goes horribly wrong, like in 2020, for a recent example, and in a dozen countries where they put faked voting machines, which we did. We did that. America did that. Bad. We cried democracy and then make it fail on purpose. Good job, guys. Democracy is not great. That leads to tyranny, not order. Order does not lead to tyranny. Plato is pretty clear about this in the Republic. I don't know where these guys are getting this from. I'm like, are you sure you want to read old books? Because you don't seem to be very good at it. I'm just telling. If you want the goods, they're in the video. You can look it up.
So Mark, what is the problem with tyranny? Please explain.
I don't want to say there's necessarily a problem with tyranny. And I think if you want to talk, I think it's more fruitful to talk right now in these times, we'll say over the past 70, 80 years plus, maybe a little bit more. Maybe it goes back to Napoleon. I'd have to really dig into that. You probably need Adam here for that. Sorry. This age of gnosis definition of tyranny is something like any kind of person or institution telling an individual what to do. And I'm like, oh, that's so broad. People need to be told what to do. You need to be
Yeah.
This happens all the time.
And some people try to resolve that by saying there's the positive and negative telling people what to do.
Right. Yeah, right. Exactly. They try to resolve it the wrong way. It's sometimes, somebody needs to remind me I have cough medicine in my house. I don't know what to tell you. That's happened to me several times. I've done that for other people. Hey, we have this solution to this problem, right? And it could be anything. You have a hammer, right? And you could just use the hammer to do that. Because people forget, they get trapped in their own personal private perspective. They lose sight of the tools and utilities they have, and they need to be reminded. Is that tyranny that somebody told you, use a hammer, dummy? Or use a saw, you idiot, instead of something else? I don't view that as tyranny. Or somebody says, we're out of food, go to the store. Am I tyrannizing somebody when I say that? Am I a horrible monster to remind somebody? And then yeah, you're right. The argument's always, well, it's the way you do it. It's your tone. And I'm like, why do you have a punchable face right now? Go away. Oh, you don't like my implementation. Can you do better? No, you can't. You're annoying already. What are we talking about here? Right? And under that rubric, and this is why the individualism is dangerous, because to the individual, every other individual saying anything about how the world should be becomes tyrannical, and tyranny is seen as a negative. Tyranny is not a negative. I can give you an example you may or may not understand since you're not from around here, i.e. America. The president in times of war has dictatorial, or dare I say, tyrannical power over the country, where he can actually and needs to be able to by the way. And this idea is not uniquely American. The implementation is uniquely American for sure. The idea is not uniquely American at all. The Kings did this too. All rights can be suspended, like complete during the Great War, the first and second acts of the Great War. Like the president, with advisors, granted, because you can't do this stuff alone anyway, not at that scale, can't do anything alone at that scale, right? The president's going, you're not going to report that. You're not going to say that. You know what? You're from this place. We're going to put you in a special camp. And there were some problems around that because anytime you do anything, it turns out there's problems around it. It's almost like the world's imperfect or something, dare I say it. And there are imperfect people doing imperfect things and stuff. It's going to get crazy here. Don't take my word for it, though. So that idea that sometimes tyranny is necessary is never discussed. But actually, sometimes a single person has to step up and make it.
Or is people telling other people what to do necessary? Because I don't even know what tyranny means, to be honest. I don't.
Right. Well, that's why I started with the definition of people telling other people what to do, right? Because that seems to be the definition everyone's running on.
But that happens anyway, even outside the state of war or whatever.
Well, and it's worse. So the individualism is, maybe not solely, but it's probably the single greatest contributor to the problem of judgment. Because if I do something in the world and you see it, the fact that you saw that thing, whether I see you or not, causes a lot of people who are trying to be individuals, and it would necessarily cause this, to feel judged. And now just the judgment is tyrannical because maybe I should maybe not even do that, but do something, which I would say, yeah, you should do something, you useless, lazy idiot. This is why I get very frustrated with people when they say, oh, well, they're doing something. And I'm like, okay, you're doing something online. Well, I'm kind of an expert online. I grew up online. I got lots of years online, guys. I can tell you one thing. If you can't get small things going online, like, I don't know, a website, you're not doing anything, right? It doesn't have to be a website, but like, you got to get something going. It can't be like, I went on Discord and built a Discord server and there's 2,000 people on it. Okay. There's, 2 billion people on the internet. I mean, probably not, but that's the number they throw out. Fair enough. This is not impressive. This is Tuesday. What did you build? And then they don't want to build things because that's a judgment, and they don't want to be judged because they all suck. And so to me, it's like, can you find out who sucks? Yeah. Who doesn't like things that are built? Who feels judged by other people's actions, even when those other people don't even know they exist? And that's really easy to see online, which is always puzzling. I'm always like, the worthless people in the world, I'm not saying they're worth nothing, although some of them certainly are, by the way, but the people who are worth less in the world are easier to see online than they are in person. Because in person, they can regale you with all kinds of stories of projects they've been involved in, and you have no way to quickly and easily see that. But online, I can tell in 4 seconds if your Discord server is a community or just a group of random people that sometimes get together. It takes almost no effort. But people seem to think this is the hardest thing to do online. And I'm like, no, these signals are everywhere. They're easy to see. And those are the people that are most against what they're referring to as tyranny under this weird definition. But they feel tyrannized by anyone, not all of them, but many of them feel tyrannized by anyone doing anything. Or a class of them feel tyrannized by things they can't participate in or can't help with. But these are not things to feel tyrannized about, right? Like, maybe that's just not the right group for you or the right community for you. And you just need to find a community where you fit in. And again, those are the tools people need more than any other tools. You need orientation tools to tell you where other things are, whether or not they're good or bad, where you are, and whether or not that good or bad thing is good or bad for you, because that all of those variables exist. It's a very complicated sort of equation. If you were to reduce it to math, it's really just the complexity of reality or something. Does that help clear it up a little bit?
So how is the tyranny that comes after democracy different from the kingdom that comes before democracy?
So yeah, for that I kind of have to think back to Plato as best as I can. Although, man, we did that book club quite a while ago, and I've only read it once with the book club. Thank goodness I didn't try to read that on my own. I'm so grateful to my brain for not making that mistake. Um, I think the difference is in the amount of focused power, which for me, power is defined as time, energy, and attention directed. So we're talking about the amount of power and where it's focused. So the tyrant is brought into the situation because of the need to quell the chaos.
Yeah.
Specifically, I think that's pretty much what Plato is, maybe not as
Yep.
directly as people would like, but I think that's pretty much what Plato is saying is, man, this democracy thing just leads to a fracturing, and that fracturing is chaotic, because
That's interesting.
fractures are chaotic, and therefore you now need you need a strong man. You need one, right? Because only a
Yeah.
strong man can pull pieces together, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
you're focusing your time, energy, and attention, and other people are focusing their time, energy, attention on a single source of a strong man. If you want an example of this, you could pick up a history book, just one once ever, uh, about the Weimar Republic and the events that came after that. And that would
Yep.
dispel or help to dispel the myth of World War II, which I do have a video on, by the way, for you, right? And start to understand that pattern. And that's the middle of the pattern, by the way. That's why there's two acts of the Great War, right? That's not the beginning of the pattern. So, like, dispelling the myth of World War II is not going to do what people think it's going to do. It's going to make things much worse, which is what we're seeing actually. It's what we're living through right now. But
Yep.
when you direct that towards a strong man, the odds that you're going to get, will say, the strongest, meanest, most controlled, motivated person in the set of persons that you trust enough, uh, is very high, and that's how you get Stalin. Like that's exactly how you get Lenin and Stalin, both of whom
Yeah.
are equally horrific monsters. And Peterson makes that point, right? Like
Yeah.
that's how that happens. Now that didn't happen, quote, democratically, we'll say, but in Hitler's case, it did. Like, it's 100% democratic. It's just that
Well, it
those are the
happened
people
in
that
everyone's
right.
case.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It always happens.
Well, it's the pattern of history. I mean, that's why Plato in Book 8 goes through that history, right? He goes through the pattern. And people miss it. They talk about the pattern in the book. I'm like, yeah, but A, you didn't get all the patterns in the book, and B, yeah, it's a pattern. Like, hey, did you read Book 8? I read it a little more careful. Take some notes. Like maybe every sentence, take a note, because I think you're missing stuff. I think you're missing a lot. Oh, really? A Book 8's really rich. Actually, I gotta reread that. Maybe we'll do a book club on my channel and not on the Texas Wisdom Community channel this time. And we'll do Plato's Republic again, because it was, who knows what we can get out the second time. It was pretty good the first go round. So I think that's what Plato's hinting at there. Although I am stretching right to the edge of A, my memory, and B, my ability to recapitulate ideas of a great man, because Plato, the last philosopher, maybe you can count Aristotle as the last true philosopher, but yeah, I'm right at the limit. But that seemed to make sense, right?
Yeah, it kind of does, but I think I
I
still
mean,
need to
well, let
to
me
think
let me
about
do
it.
the other side. So the kingship is mediated by a different set of decision making. That decision making isn't democratic explicitly, right? Like democracy in kingdoms is not really a thing. And it's not that, again, that it's not that they don't have a democratic element, right? Because a kingdom is still made up of people, and most of
Yes.
them are the lower class by definition. That's always the largest group. And maybe that's, when democracy becomes unhealthy, is when the middle class becomes the largest group. We'll leave that for another stream. Uh, looking at you, United States. Be, the king is supposed to raise, and the noble class in general is supposed to raise a stable of people that are made aware of and formed within the thinking of a certain layer of society where they're not supposed to think of themselves. And of course, that's impossible. So sometimes you're going to get a bad king. I get that. Also, show me your perfect system first before you criticize the system that worked really well for thousands of years. Then we'll chat. Otherwise, I'm just going to shut you off anyway. I'll smile and nod and be polite and totally ignore you for sure. Right. So you're supposed to be able to think not about yourself, but about the goods of the group. And if you ever study, maybe 2 once history books ever, right? If you ever study what noble education looked like, it's very much not only around virtues and values, which is very important, but not everybody can play in that space, guys. Let's be honest, right? Not everyone's the same. We can't all read virtues and values and get the same thing out of it or enough out of it, or maybe anything out of it. But they're at least given that viewpoint where you can't choose to just do what the knights want, or to just do what the merchants want, or to just give in to the demands of the numerous peasants. You can't do any of those things, right? Your decision making as part of the noble class has to be considerate of this idea of a greater good or larger good, or good for the largest group or something. But it also has to protect the noble class. And that's not a self-preservation thing. It's because without a noble class, something at the top, you lose the head, the body disintegrates, right? The body cannot live without the mind, if you want to put it in Matrix terms. Also, it's in the Matrix, by the way. So I don't know what to tell you.
And even that sort of thinking is reserved for that class of people, and not for other class. It would be inappropriate for those people, for the lower classes.
Well, and it kind of has to be.
Yeah.
It kind of has to be, because there is this thing that I talk about called cognitive load. And I think one of the greatest problems that we have, and the work of Dale Farron, if you haven't checked out our work, it's excellent, sort of indicates this for the science idiots out there that really love the science thing. It's in the research, guys. I hate to, but there is research and it's in there, right? If you overtrain people on propositions, right, or if you overtrained people on how to govern groups or how to make group decisions, their brain might not have enough space to be trained on how to grow crops. And I got news for you. Growing crops is more important, because you ain't got groups to manage if you ain't got enough crops. So I don't know. I'm just saying, right? Like Jordan Peterson, right? Plumbers have saved more lives than doctors. Right. They're a little bit more important in a way. Most people can do without a doctor. There's plenty of people that never go to the doctor and live perfectly long lives. But if you don't have good plumbing, you're probably going to die of sepsis or something, right? So there's an asymmetry there that people never think about, because in the age of gnosis, with propositions as knowledge as the highest value, they just think book learning is the best thing ever. And I'm like, nah, I'm a no on the burn. I'm a burn on the book, all the books guy at this point. I can't justify that at all. Again, earlier, right, you guys can't even read Plato's Republic correctly, and you're going to tell me to read old books. That's the game? Because I'm going to tell you you're full of it and you don't know what you're talking about, and you're probably insane, because there's a lot of data about this, and that doesn't work. It doesn't have the effect you think it has. A lot of people will use, the so-called allegory of the cave completely incorrectly to justify a Petersonian individualistic worldview, although obviously it predates Peterson, when it's impossible for Plato to be saying something less like that. the point of book 7 is that individualism cannot work and should not be tried and does not function. That's actually part of the allegory of the cave, if you actually know how to read and comprehend what you read. And that's, again, if you're going to interpret it for yourself, maybe you're stupid if you kind of read it that way. I'm sorry to say it, but also it's pretty clear. I have a whole video on this with all the goods. You can grab a book You can grab your own damn translation and look it up with my video. And yeah, if you think something's wrong, that would be great. I'd love to hear it, but I don't think I made a mistake there. I make lots of mistakes, not in that video. Sorry, guys. So yeah, and I think when we're living in this age where people think like, oh, you just read the great books or listen to the great lectures about the great books, right? The Peterson Academy thesis. That these quote problems, if they are indeed problems and not perennial patterns, go away or would be solved because the individuals involved will magically conform to some what I refer to as objective material reality. When the fact of the matter is, you're going to get a king or a tyrant. You better figure out which one you want. Kings get chosen and groomed based on a different criteria than tyrants. And that, I think, is the fundamental difference, is that you want somebody chosen, through their grooming, and you don't want to just count on getting lucky and getting a really good tyrant, which you could make the argument right now. That's a silly argument, and it's completely wrong. That Donald Trump is a relatively benign and good tyrant. It's not the right way to think about it at all, but it has enough rhyme to it to be useful. Like, imagine if you got some person who was as bad as, we'll say, Trump's enemies thinks he is, or something. That could potentially be disastrous, even in a system like we have. That would look more like FDR. FDR was a horrible scumbag and really did a lot of damage to the United States, right? But where we're living in this rough world where people think democracy is wonderful, and they think that's fighting tyranny, when Plato's pretty clear, no, that's what causes it. And I think the fundamental problem is when you hold the individual or the idea of the individual up, democracy has to be your political lever. You really can't afford any other. But even those people, they all want term limits. And I'm like, do you want democracy or term limits? Because those are at odds with one another. Like, if it's democracy, there's no justification for term limits. If there's term limits, then your democracy is not the answer you think it is, obviously. But people, for whatever reason, they struggle with these concepts, and they all tell me they read these great books. And I'm like, did you though? Are you sure? Did you read them and just not get it? I'm always confused, actually. I don't know why this is confusing for everybody else. So bring back the kings of Europe, Gustavs, please.
Yeah, we're working on it.
I hope so. I leave it to you,
Yeah.
sir.
Thank you. Well, I think the tyranny stuff happens when you have too much when you're trying to make a hierarchical connection that's too far up. Like when you have people who are just
Yeah.
who are trying to impose lots of order on like people, or on, let's say, a land that just doesn't support that sort of order. I don't know. You can look at sort of marshy swamps and think of people trying to impose, I don't know, like a German level of just like straight roads and everything, and just like you end up doing ridiculous stuff, building roads that just shouldn't be there, building houses where they shouldn't be there, because you're trying to impose a certain sort of order on land that just doesn't support it. Or like on a tropical island with shifting sandbanks and stuff like that. You just can't, like, there's places in the world that can't support certain sorts of order, and yeah, maybe over generations you can sort of you can shape the land. You can start by building roads, then you can maybe do a couple terraces, and over time you'll have a very civilized place. But if you try to do too much too fast, then it leads to a really bad regime, and that applies to people as well. I would say that there's people who like we've seen this all the time, like in the colonial era of the world, where you had um people going to parts of the world where people have never worn trousers before, and then you sort of suddenly expect everything to change and people to use the doctor, and yeah, come on, man, start slow and go slow. Like, don't expect them to wear a suit and tie, very soon.
Right.
Uh,
Right. Small
Yeah,
steps.
like small
We're all
steps.
about the small steps. But how about this as a way to look at this tyranny thing? So we'll just take Plato seriously because again, like really, you're going to use someone else? Come on. Um, Democracy is an equality doctrine, right? It's a flattening of the world. And
Yeah,
then you're longing for that hierarchy, for that deeper hierarchy, because you flatten the world. But because you've already flattened the world, you're looking across at a field that's roughly flat, right? And so everybody looks kind of the same, except for the people who stick out, right? And then those are the guys that stick out that actually do things or get things done, or at least give you a way to interact with getting things done, or see a vision or something. Those are the guys that are going to rise up to provide that tyrannical order. But the order is only tyrannical because they came from some random unknown place. And again, maybe you get lucky, right? And you get a benevolent dictator or something, which happens.
yeah,
I mean, it's happened historically, but the odds of that happening are relatively small. And you're sort of better off going with some kind of hereditary line, or family that's built something. I mean, I think that's why what ends up happening a lot of times is uh, businessmen are seen as maybe the next politician. I mean, in the U.S. we had this argument all along. I jest not. You're not going to believe me because it doesn't sound realistic. But 2 years, well, actually 6 months before Trump announced that he was running for office, there were plenty of Democrats, and Republicans have always said this, there were plenty of Democrats in the United States saying, what we really need is a businessman as president. I can show you tape. Like,
hmm,
this is all over the news. This is not, I mean, you can see you talking heads and talking head experts coming on saying what we really need is somebody who's a businessman to come and straighten this out and straighten that out. And of course, the minute Trump announces everyone's against the best businessman running, we could argue about how good that is, but he was clearly better than any of the other businessmen running. They're suddenly just against him on whatever grounds, even though he's still a Democrat to this day. Uh, like the weirdness of the world is just explosively
yeah,
hysterical at some point. So yeah, I mean, I think that's where that confusion comes from. Is building something is a powerful signal, right? And whoa, if you can build something in the economic realm, we'll call it, maybe you can build something in the realm, in the quote political realm, or in the realm of governance is actually what people are talking about, or what they should be talking about. And it's an easy confusion in an equalized world. The flatter the world, the harder it's going to be to tell the difference between somebody with virtuous intent and somebody who just wants to build for building's sake, right? Like, you
yep,
know, maybe Elon Musk, and I'm not going to say anything against Elon Musk. I kind of like Elon. Also, I have video about him. Um, Maybe Elon Musk, his intent is utilitarian and not virtuous, right? And maybe that would work out okay if he were in charge, or dictator of the United States or the world or something. I don't know,
yeah,
but I'd rather go with somebody who is trained in the virtues and the values, and who maybe lived in a monastery for 5 years, or whatever. Like, I mean, these are goes to Catholic Church every day, never had a divorce, right? Married with 12 kids or whatever, right? I might want to choose them over an Elon, even though Elon can
yep.
clearly build stuff and build it very quickly and quite well, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's really important to have a division between builders and leaders because the purpose of builders should be to build, and of leaders to decide when to build and where to build.
And
Because
to
sometimes
take
you're not supposed to be building. Sometimes you're supposed to be reconstructing or putting all your resources into the army maybe, or into something else. And it's a really messed up situation when the builders are the ones deciding, and when the leaders are just devoted to building for like towards an abstract unknown purpose that we can't define,
yeah.
but many of our leaders are builders. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that gave me sort of a sort of a little insight, um, that maybe would be a tease for a future video. In fact, a future live stream. I think that's how you resolve the scapegoat problem as stated by Girard. Is what you actually do is you acknowledge that the leader is taking the responsibility as a sacrifice for getting stuff done as such at that scale. And now you have a proper scapegoat, because leaders are often scapegoated for the thing. And that would actually resolve and sort of, quote, redeem, although Girard's burning in hell forever, as far as I can tell, Girard's little thesis about the scapegoat. I think that would be how you would fix that. And that's a little teaser for a future video for sure, that we'll have to dive into that topic. But all of this is caused by the individualism, because that flattens the world down to this horizontal plane, and it gets rid of final cause, because final cause is all the way at the top by definition, right? Your telos, your telos is all the way at the top. And if you don't have a sense for how far up that is, how abstract that can get, and if you don't have people who are, we'll say, good at abstraction, or maybe good at symbolism, like the Peugeot brothers are, then you have a problem. And those people need to steer, a guy like Peterson. And Peterson has to acquiesce to that, right? In a relationship, like they have to cooperate in a certain way, a specific way with the structure, in order to manifest better things. Otherwise, they're all off doing their own thing, which, by the way, they seem to all be off doing their own thing. As much as I like symbolic world, like, and there's crossover with Peterson Academy. It's like, shouldn't that all be one thing, guys? Like, can't we just like build a thing together? It's all this fractured non-cooperation, even if it's not in direct competition. There's still that tension there, and it causes a tension for the people engaging. Where do I put my time? Do I put my time into Peterson Academy, or do I take courses from Symbolic World? Because it turns out my time's limited, and so is my energy and my attention, for that matter. And so I have to know where to put that. And if I had a system that could help me, this is one of the reasons why the U.S. military gets people and turns them, most of them, from the trouble cases, or uncertain cases, into powerhouses of productivity. They have the ASVABs. They have a test. You take a test. They tell you what things you'd be good at in the military, and then they offer you the job, right? And then it's not one branch in the military; it's all the branches in the military. ASVAB covers everything, right up to and including, because they actually sort of hinted at this with me. You go to CIA. I was like, what? Really? Oh, interesting. Maybe I do want to go into basic training, but I did not. And there were good reasons for that. But it covers that, right? I mean, it solves the domicile for an uncertain, teenager, because you take that when you're in high school. And then the recruiters come in, and, a lot of people rail against that. I think, no, that's actually the right answer, because it catches a bunch of people that need it. People don't know where they're going in life. They need an option. Someone from the outside has to give them that option. They're not really individuals, as we covered earlier. And I think that really is the failure of Peterson, is his individualism, because that's individualism and objectivism. They go hand in hand, right with the materialism. They all coexist somehow. Like, you fall into one of those pits, and the other two pits are like, you get them for free. It's not a good thing.
Yeah. We're so immersed and flooded by books and so many options that we think we have universal access to every opportunity, and we take for granted that some of them are unavailable to us, because we just don't, we never hear about them. They never occur to us. And like, are you going to think of it by yourself? Probably no. You won't, actually. You won't. You need to have opportunities presented to you by somebody. So you should be grateful for every opportunity that you get. And we're so immersed in these, books and everything, that we're even further separated from the people who wrote those books, and where did they get that from, and so on. So there's a lot of gratitude in reordering the world, and acknowledging where things come from, and that we get them from places. that we are in many ways ordered by other people into what we're doing.
Formed. Yeah, formed.
Yeah.
Yeah. But when you're a young child, particularly a baby, but also, up until you're probably 20 or something, you do not understand the created order into which you were born, and you need to be formed within that. And the people that form you have to be people outside of you. You cannot form yourself. That makes no sense. It's self-referential. You're trapped inside your personal private perspective. And maybe they did a crappy job. I get that, because that certainly happened to me in particular. But also, like, what choice do you have? And maybe we need to focus more on formation rather than whatever education is supposed to be, as a way of helping people. And I think that's one of the things Peterson does. This is why people call him like Father or Papa Peterson or whatever, because a lot of people do that. I was like, well, that's a weird thing to do. But it's not, when you think, oh, he's fulfilling a role that fathers, it was sort of, I don't know, ingrained in genetically, like your father is supposed to form these things in you and didn't. And here's Peterson forming those things in you. So he's kind of your father in that way.
Yes.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Also, like, we should take that seriously and really consider what that means. Like, how did we get in a situation like that, right? And he's not the only one, for sure, right?
Exactly. So we all, every one of us that's learned calculus at some point, we have learned that from Newton with extra steps, and we should also be grateful for those extra steps. But yeah,
Right.
it comes from Newton, and that's like a clear example when you can appreciate and think of that and so on. But there's so many other things in our life about our habits and our good manners and our good habits and the good things that we do, the way that we interact with other people, the things we've picked up, the skills that we have, and just like an attitude in life has pretty much all been received from other people, and mostly our parents, but not always. Not
Mm.
always, and very much of the important stuff sometimes isn't. There's lots of stuff going on for every one of us, but we should be, this whole idea of pulling ourselves up by the bootstraps. It's like, in some ways, yes, but in some ways, like, there's always an opportunity somewhere that was offered to people. Like, if you leave kids alone on a tropical island, they don't start building computers, or they don't
Right.
start building books, and
Right.
and they don't start, using the right cutlery. It's not going to go anywhere ever.
Right.
Nowhere.
Right.
It's not some sort of evolutionary thing, and we know this. We just don't like to point at it because that means that we have an opportunity to instruct other people in the good things that we have, and nobody wants to do that.
Yeah, exactly, because they're tyrannical, right? And they don't want to tyrannize their children. They don't want to tyrannize other people. But you're right, and I think the way to think about pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps, when I agree, it's completely incorrect at some level, but there's a point to it. I think the point is, you have to be oriented externally in a way that you can accept good advice, help, and opportunities when they're offered, because they're always available. They're not always available at each second of your life, but they're always available to you if you're oriented correctly. And so the pulling yourself up by your bootstraps is more orient yourself correctly to prepare yourself for these uh, opportunities that are offered, right? Or advice that's offered that leads to opportunities, or whatever, right? There's
Yeah.
lots of layers there. So
Yeah,
I
there's
think
there's there's there's
absolutely.
virtue in having an attitude that you can receive guidance somehow. There's
Exactly.
virtue in that.
Exactly. Yeah, that's part of humility, which is definitely one of the virtues. Uh, which we have virtue cards, so you can, we got to get the virtue card games going. We got the board games making progress. We got to get the card games going. We'll have to work on that in the upcoming week. And look, I think we're going to wrap it up. Do you have any closing thoughts?
Not really. Just I'm quite overwhelmed.
That's
Yeah.
fair. This is whenever you open this can of worms, you know you're asking for trouble. I mean, you know I'm glad you get overwhelmed today because you overwhelmed me yesterday when you dropped that nuclear weapon on my head, and I had to deal with it. So I really appreciate that, and I appreciate your time and all the effort you put into those wonderful slides. And you know, I know that's a lot of work. So you know, we really appreciate it. I'll just say that on the behalf of the audience. I'll take responsibility for my audience here. So thank you very much for that. I hope people like and comment and subscribe and all that. We are still trying to grow the channel. And look, I mean, we have these sorts of discussions. We'll say not at this depth on the Mark of Wisdom Discord server all the time. So if you're on Discord or you want to have these discussions, you could get on Discord and join that server because that's where these things start. We'll say. And you can also contribute. We've got this movie club project going on. That's on the community tab of YouTube. It's also that those details are in the Mark of Wisdom server. So I got to do announcements around that today anyway. So I'll do that later. I got another video I'm releasing, which is actually just a monologue. I have another. It's a reaction video, not quite a commentary, but also a commentary coming out in 2 parts. So that's in the works. Yeah, I mean, I hope you got something out of this, and I hope that you know these slides were helpful for you. And Gustavs, are we going to be able to make those slides available to people who want them, or is that something
Yeah,
you?
they'll be on the Discord server.
All right. We'll put them up on the Discord server, and then if somebody wants to review them or whatever and go over them while they listen to the talk or something, they can do that. And I really appreciate everybody's participation. And look for more videos. We do more videos kind of randomly. Join us Friday evenings at 7 p.m. Eastern time, where I do my pirate live streams. Those are monologues plus participation. We would have let somebody in had they asked, but nobody seemed to want to come up today, which is fine. So these can go either way. And I want to do more stuff. So if people tell me what they want to see, maybe I can squeeze it in. But everybody have a wonderful day. Make Final Cause great again. And look, take care of yourself and take care of each other, which is a sacrifice, right? Which is super important. Don't get stuck in the Peterson problem. Have a lovely day.